his fingers stilled against her skin. Something was wrong. He knew this woman. He knew the exact way her breath would hitch when he got too close. He knew the way she used to say his name, like it cost her something to keep it in, but she stepped back like his touch burned. "Don't touch me." Her voice was cold, sharp, completely unfamiliar. Han Jae-won's jaw tightened. 2 years ago, this same woman had spent 30 nights in his space, warm, fearless, the kind of woman you don't forget even when you're trying to. And then she was gone. No call, no note, no trace. Like she had simply decided to stop existing. Now she was standing in front of him again. Same face, same body, same mouth that used to say his name, but a completely different person behind the eyes. "I've never met you before." Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. Han Jae-won didn't forget faces, and he definitely didn't get forgotten. So if she was pretending, he was going to make her remember, even if it broke her. The building had 42 floors. Han Jae-won owned all of them. From the outside, it looked like what it was supposed to look like. Glass and steel, and the kind of quiet that expensive architecture buys. The sign above the entrance said, Hanyul Capital Group in clean silver letters. Respectable. Unremarkable. The sort of name that showed up in financial papers and stayed out of everything else. That was the point. Inside, the people who worked on the upper floors knew exactly who Han Jae-won was. They had signed things that made sure they never forgot. The people on the lower floors, maintenance, cleaning, catering, knew only that their paychecks arrived on time and that the man whose name was on the building was not someone you looked at directly in the corridor. Jessica Adeyemi had been working the lower floors for 3 weeks. She had arrived in Seoul 8 months ago with 2 suitcases, a contact number for a cousin who had since moved to Busan, and the particular stubbornness of a woman who had been figuring things out alone her entire life. She had grown up in Lagos, studied business administration at a university that asked more of her financially than it ever gave back, and arrived in South Korea on a work visa with a plan that had since been revised 4 times. The cleaning job was revision number 4. It was not what she had come for, but it paid consistently. The agency that placed her was legitimate. And the building was climate-controlled in a way that Lagos had never prepared her for. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself that every morning when she clocked in at the service entrance on the ground floor. She had not known whose building it was until her first day. By then, she had already signed the paperwork. She was meticulous about her work in the way that people are when they know they cannot afford to lose something. She kept her own log, a small notebook she carried in the front pocket of her uniform. Every room she cleaned, every task completed, every supervisor sign-off. She was not sure why she started doing it. Something in the building made her feel like she needed to be able to prove herself at any moment. She would later understand that instinct had been correct. Jae-won had been in Japan for 16 days. He came back on a Wednesday morning, earlier than his team expected, and walked through the main entrance without stopping at the front desk. His head of security fell into step beside him at the elevator. His assistant was already talking before the doors closed. He listened to 12 days of updates in 4 floors of elevator ride and said almost nothing. He was tired in the way that men like him got tired. Not from lack of sleep, but from the weight of being the person every decision eventually returned to. Japan had been complicated. He did not want to think about Japan anymore. The elevator opened on the 38th floor. He stepped out. His assistant continued talking. He walked the length of the corridor toward his office with the particular focus of a man who had already decided what the next 3 hours would look like. Then he saw her. She was at the far end of the corridor with her back to him, pushing her cart slowly toward the service exit. She was wearing the standard gray uniform all the cleaning staff wore. Her hair was pulled back. She was moving with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had learned to pace herself across a long shift. Jae-won stopped walking. His assistant said something he didn't hear, because he knew that back. He knew the way those shoulders sat. He knew the particular way she carried herself, like she had somewhere better to be and had decided not to go there yet. It was such a specific thing to recognize, such an unreasonable thing to be certain of. And yet, Sir? He was already walking toward her. She turned at the sound of his footsteps. The corridor was quiet enough that she heard him coming from a distance, and she turned the way anyone turns when they sense someone approaching with purpose. Her eyes met his, and there was nothing there. No recognition, no guilt, no flash of a woman catching herself. Just a young woman looking at a man she had never seen before, who was walking toward her like he had a reason to. Jae-won stopped 2 feet in front of her. He looked at her face, same eyes, same mouth, same architecture of bone and expression that had stayed in his memory for 2 years, despite everything he had done to remove it. "Can I help you?" she said. Polite, careful. The voice of someone who was aware of the power difference in a corridor and was choosing her words accordingly. Jae-won said nothing for a moment. Then, "How long have you been working here?" She blinked. 3 weeks. "And before that?" A small pause. "I'm sorry?" "Before this building. Where were you?" She looked at him the way you look at someone when you're trying to decide if they are confused or dangerous. "I was placed here by an agency. Is there a problem with my work?" He studied her face. "What is your name?" Jessica Adeyemi." She said it evenly, without flinching, but her hand had tightened on the cart handle. He noticed. "Jessica." He said it quietly, like he was testing the shape of it, like he was waiting for her to correct him and give him a different name. She didn't. "I think," she said carefully, "that you might have me confused with someone else." The corridor was very still. Jae-won looked at her for a long time. Long enough that another person might have looked away. Jessica did not look away. She held his gaze with the steady composure of a woman who had learned that looking away first cost you something. He almost said something. Then he stepped back. "Carry on," he said. He turned and walked to his office. He pulled her file within the hour. Jessica Adeyemi, 24 years old, Nigerian national, work visa current, placed by a licensed staffing agency with a clean record. No prior employment history in Seoul. No connections to anyone in his organization. No red flags of any kind. He sat back in his chair and looked at the photograph the agency had submitted with her file. The same face that had just looked at him in the corridor without a single trace of recognition. He had been in rooms with liars his entire adult life. He had built a career on the ability to see through performance, to find the crack in the composure, to know the difference between someone who didn't know something and someone who was pretending not to. She had not been performing, which meant one of 2 things. Either she was the most controlled person he had ever encountered, or she genuinely did not know him. He closed the file. He did not fire her. He did not call the agency. He did not have her escorted from the building. He picked up his phone and called his head of security instead. "The new cleaning staff on 38, he said. "Jessica Adeyemi. I want everything there is to know about her life before she came to Seoul. Quietly." He set the phone down. Outside his window, Seoul stretched in every direction, indifferent and enormous. Han Jae-won stared at the file photograph for another long moment. Then he closed it and went back to work, but his mind did not follow. 2 years ago, Seoul was in the middle of the kind of summer that made the city feel closer than usual. The heat sat on everything. The nights were loud and warm, and people stayed out later than they should. Han Jae-won owned a bar in Gangnam called Sero. On paper, it belonged to a holding company. In practice, everyone who mattered knew whose name was behind it. It was the kind of place that didn't advertise, didn't need to, and where the wrong kind of attention never lasted long enough to become a problem. The interior was dark wood and low lighting, and the sort of quiet that money creates when it decides to relax. Jae-won used it the way other men used a private office. A place to meet people without the formality of a boardroom. A place where the conversations that couldn't happen anywhere else happened here instead. He was there on a Thursday night in July when the private event in the back room finished earlier than scheduled. The coordinator was supposed to leave with her clients. She didn't. He noticed her because she was the only person left at the bar after everyone else had gone, sitting with her back straight and a glass of something amber in front of her, looking at nothing in particular, with the focused expression of someone running through a mental list. She was not dressed for his kind of bar. She was dressed for work. A blazer she had pushed the sleeves up on, a notebook on the counter beside her drink. She had clearly been on her feet for hours, and had decided that leaving was something she would do after one drink and not before. One of his staff approached her to let her know the bar was closing. She looked up and said something that made the staff member stop, then nod, then walk away without asking her to leave. Jae-won watched that exchange from across the room. He walked over. "What did you say to him?" he asked. She looked up at him without any of the usual adjustment people made when they realized who he was. Either she didn't know or she didn't care. He couldn't tell which yet. "I told him I coordinated a 4-hour event for 12 people who drank like they were trying to forget something important, and that I needed 10 minutes and one drink before I could be a functional human being again." She picked up her glass. He seemed to understand. Jae-won sat down on the stool beside her. She looked at him sideways. "That seat is taken." "By who?" "By the version of me that wants to sit here alone." He almost smiled. He didn't. "I own this bar." She considered that for a moment. "Then I suppose the seat is yours." Her name was Jennifer Adeyemi. She was 25, Nigerian, had been in Seoul for 2 months, coordinating corporate events, through a contact she had met at a Lagos networking function. She was sharp and composed, and spoke the way people speak when they have learned that being underestimated is a tool if you know how to use it. She did not perform for him. That was the thing he kept coming back to. Every woman he had encountered in the past several years had adjusted themselves in some way the moment they understood who he was. Softer or sharper or more careful. Jennifer did not adjust. She continued being exactly what she had been before he sat down, which was someone who had worked a long shift and wanted her drink in peace. He stayed until the bar closed. He came back the next Thursday. She was not there. But she came back the week after, and this time she saw him first and sat beside him without being asked. That was how it started. What followed was not a relationship either of them named. He was not a man who made declarations, and she was not a woman who asked for them. But she came back, and he was always there when she did. And somewhere in the 3rd week, it stopped being Thursday only and became something more frequent and less defined. She was fearless in the way that people are when they don't fully understand the danger. She asked him questions that no one else asked. Not about his business. She was too intelligent to go there directly. But about him. What he thought about. What he wanted. What he had decided to stop wanting because it wasn't practical for a man like him. He answered her more than he intended to. She laughed easily. Not the careful social laugh of someone managing an impression, but something genuine and sudden that she didn't always seem to see coming herself. He found himself doing things to earn it without examining why. 30 nights. That was what they had. Some of them were just conversation. Some of them were more. All of them were the kind of hours that accumulate into something you don't realize is significant until it's gone. She stayed over for the first time in the 3rd week. She left before he woke up, and he told himself that was fine, because he hadn't asked her to stay anyway. She came back 2 nights later, like nothing had shifted. He let it be what it was. He knew she was aware of what his world looked like. He could see it in the way she sometimes paused before answering a question about him, like she was making a decision about how much she wanted to know. He respected that. He didn't push her toward the parts of his life that would have changed the texture of what they had. He thought he was protecting her from something. He did not know she was already protecting herself from him. The last night was a Saturday in August. She arrived later than usual, quieter than usual. She sat beside him and drank her drink and talked about a difficult client, and laughed twice, and at some point leaned her head briefly against his shoulder in a way she had never done before. It lasted only a moment. She straightened up like she hadn't meant to do it. He didn't mention it. At 3 a.m., she said she was tired, and he told her to stay. She did. He was asleep before she was. When he woke up the next morning, the other side of the bed was cold. Her things were gone. Every small trace of her. The notebook she always carried. The jacket she had left on the chair 3 visits ago. The single hair tie that had been sitting on his bathroom counter for 2 weeks. All of it gone. like she had made a decision and executed it while he was sleeping. He called the number he had for her. Disconnected. He sent someone to the address she had mentioned once in passing. The apartment had been vacated. The landlord said she had paid out the remaining month and left 2 days prior. 2 days. She had already been planning it when she came on Saturday, when she leaned her head against his shoulder, when she laughed twice and talked about her difficult client like everything was ordinary. He sat with that for a long time. Then he told himself he was angry, which was true, and that it didn't matter, which was not. His people searched for 3 weeks. See, they found nothing that led anywhere useful. A woman who had come to Seoul on a visa, coordinated events for 2 months, spent 30 nights in his orbit, and then removed herself so completely it was almost professional. He stopped the search after the 3rd week. He told himself that was a decision. It was also, though he would not have used the word at the time, a wound. He packed it away in the place where he kept things he had decided not to examine, and went back to work. And he did not think about Jennifer Adiemi again, until he walked out of an elevator on a Wednesday morning 2 years later and saw her face on a woman who did not know his name. What Jennifer knew that she never told him, she had missed her period the week before that last Saturday. She had told herself it was stress. She had told herself that right up until she sat beside him that night and felt something settle in her chest that terrified her more than the missed period did. She left because she had looked at Han Jae-won across 30 nights and understood, with the clarity that only fear produces, that she was not equipped to be in his world. Not with a maybe child. Not with stakes that high. Not when disappearing was still an option. She took the option. She found out for certain 10 days after she landed in London. She did not call him. She told herself she was protecting her child. She was also protecting herself, and she was honest enough, in her quietest moments, to know the difference. 3 weeks after Jae-won walked back into his building and found a ghost pushing a cleaning cart, he still had no answers. The report his head of security compiled on Jessica Adeyemi was thorough and completely useless. Born in Lagos, grew up in an orphanage in Ibadan after being left there as an infant, aged out of the system at 18, put herself through a business administration program at a private university in Lagos through a combination of a partial scholarship and work she did on the side. Arrived in Seoul 8 months ago on a work visa. Had held 3 jobs since arriving, a restaurant, a convenience store night shift, and now the agency placement at Hanyul Capital Group. No family listed, no next of kin, no connections to anyone in Seoul beyond a cousin who had relocated to Busan and appeared to have lost contact with her shortly after she arrived. No connection to Jennifer Adeyemi anywhere in the document. The names were the same. The country was the same. The face was the same. But on paper, they were 2 entirely separate people who had never occupied the same space. Jae-won read the report twice, set it down, and decided to watch her himself. Not overtly. He was not a man who made his interest visible before he understood what he was interested in. He simply began to pay attention in the way that came naturally to him, quietly, from a distance, with the patience of someone who had learned that most things revealed themselves if you waited long enough. He restructured his morning routine without announcing it. He arrived earlier. He took different corridors. He created small reasons to be on the floors where the cleaning staff worked at the start of the day. Jessica moved through her shift with a consistency that was almost rhythmic. She started on the top floors and worked her way down. She cleaned the same way every time, methodical, quiet, without the kind of performance that people sometimes put on when they suspected they were being observed. She was not performing. She simply worked. She brought her lunch in a container, with her name written on the lid in black marker. Jessica. Written in the particular way of someone who has shared space with other people's things for most of their life, and learned early to label what was theirs. That detail stayed with him longer than it should have. She was warm with the other cleaning staff, in a way that Jennifer had never been warm with anyone. Jennifer's warmth was selective, directed, deployed with the precision of someone who understood its value. Jessica's warmth was just there. She laughed at things people said in passing. She remembered names. One of the older women on the maintenance team had mentioned once, within earshot of a junior staff member, who later mentioned it in a report, that Jessica had brought her medicine from a pharmacy across the city because she had overheard her saying the branch near the building didn't carry it. She had done it without being asked and without mentioning it again. Jennifer would never have done that. Not because she was unkind, but because Jennifer's attention had always been on the larger picture, the strategic move, the thing that mattered. Small kindnesses for their own sake had not been part of how she operated. Jessica operated almost entirely in small kindnesses. Jaewon noticed this, and it confused him more than the face did. Because the face he could have explained away. People looked like other people. It happened. The world was large and genetics were indifferent. But the face combined with the name, combined with the country, combined with this specific quality of being, that was too much coincidence to sit with comfortably. He increased his observation. He watched for the crack, the moment she forgot herself and reacted to something in a way that didn't fit. A flinch when she heard his name mentioned in a corridor. A pause that lasted a beat too long when someone referenced the upper floors where his office was. Anything. It didn't come. She was simply herself. Completely and consistently herself, in the way that is only possible when there is nothing underneath being managed. He was beginning to consider an explanation he was not ready to consider when Shin Woochul came to his office on a Thursday afternoon with a personnel concern. Woochul had been with the organization for 7 years. He was meticulous, reliable, and possessed the particular quality that Jaewon valued above almost everything else in the people around him. He did not waste words. When he spoke, it was because something needed to be said. When he was quiet, it was because nothing did. He sat down across from Jaewon and placed a single printed sheet on the desk. "There have been some issues with one of the cleaning staff," he said. "Inventory discrepancies on 2 floors. A missing access card that was later found in her cart. A complaint filed by one of the junior managers about her conduct." Jaewon looked at the sheet. Such Jessica Adeyemi's name was at the top. What kind of conduct? Unprofessional behavior. Spending time in areas she wasn't assigned to. Jaewon looked at Woochul for a moment. Has this been verified? The inventory logs are documented. The access card was recovered from her cart personally by the floor supervisor. And the conduct complaint? Filed anonymously through the internal system. Jaewon set the sheet down. Keep me informed. Woochul nodded and left. Jaewon sat with that conversation for the rest of the afternoon. Woochul had been with him for 7 years. His instinct had never flagged the man for anything, but something about the timing of that report, the precise moment when Jaewon's own attention had turned toward Jessica, sat in a way he could not immediately name. He did not act on it yet. He filed it. Jessica, for her part, had begun to feel it. Not Jaewon's observations specifically. She did not know the man well enough yet to recognize when his attention was on her. But she felt the building's attitude toward her shifting in a way she could not pin to anything specific. A supervisor who had been warm in the first 2 weeks became clipped. A floor she had been assigned to without issue was suddenly reassigned to someone else without explanation. Small things that individually meant nothing and collectively meant something. She started keeping records. The notebook she carried in her uniform pocket had always been for task logs. She expanded it. Dates. Times. What she had been told and by whom. What she had completed and when. She did not know exactly what she was building a case against. She knew only that she had learned a long time ago that when you had nothing else, documentation was a form of protection. She was sitting in the small staff room on the ground floor one evening, updating her notebook after her shift, when she became aware that she was not alone. She looked up. Han Jae-won was standing in the doorway. He was not in his suit jacket. He had come from somewhere in the building where he had taken it off and not yet put it back on, and he looked, for the first time since she had encountered him in the corridor, like someone who was not entirely in control of what he was doing there. She closed her notebook. "Mr. Han?" she said carefully. He looked at the notebook. "What is that?" "My work log. May I see it?" She held his gaze for a moment. Then she opened it and held it out. He took it. He stood in the doorway and read through several pages slowly. His expression did not change, but something behind it did. He turned 3 pages, then 4, then went back to a page he had already read. He handed it back. "There have been complaints filed against you," he said. "I know," she said. "I have been expecting you to act on them. Why haven't you said anything?" "To who?" She put the notebook back in her pocket. "I don't know who filed them or why. I only know they are not accurate. So I documented my work and I waited." He looked at her for a long moment. "Waited for what?" "For whoever it is to make a mistake," she said simply. "People who do things quietly always do eventually." The staff room was very still. Jae-won looked at this woman, her steady eyes, her closed notebook, hide the container on the table beside her, with her name written on the lid in black marker, and felt something move in him that he did not have a clean word for. It was not what he had felt for Jennifer. It was something different. Something that didn't have the heat and the sharpness of what Jennifer had been. It was quieter than that, and somehow, because of that, harder to dismiss. He straightened up. "The complaints will be reviewed," he said. He left before she could respond. He walked back to the elevator and stood in it alone on the way up to his floor and looked at nothing in particular. He had come down there to watch her from a distance, the way he had been doing for 3 weeks. Instead, he had stood in a doorway and read her handwriting and felt, for reasons he could not fully defend, like he was the one being examined. He called her into his office 6 days later, not through her supervisor, not through the agency. He sent word directly, "Mr. Han would like to see you at 10. The message reached her through one of the floor managers, who delivered it with the particular careful neutrality of someone who had learned not to have opinions about things that happened above their pay grade. Jessica arrived at his office at exactly 10 o'clock. She had changed into a clean uniform. Her notebook was in her pocket. She had done nothing to perform readiness, and yet she was completely ready, which was the thing about her that kept catching him off guard. His assistant showed her in and closed the door. Jae-won was standing at the window with his back to her when she entered. He let the silence sit for a moment before he turned. It was a thing he did in certain kinds of meetings, a deliberate beat that told him something about the person on the other side of it. Whether they filled the silence or held it. Jessica held it. He turned and gestured to the chair across from his desk. She sat. He remained standing. "The complaints against you have been reviewed," he said. "And the inventory discrepancies cannot be traced to you directly. The access card was found in your cart, but there is no footage of you handling it. The conduct complaint was filed anonymously, and the details are inconsistent with your logged schedule for that day." She looked at him steadily. "So they were false. They appear to be." "Appear?" "I deal in what I can verify," he said. "What I can verify is that the case against you does not hold." She was quiet for a moment. "Am I being let go?" "No." She nodded once. Then she reached into her pocket, took out her notebook, and placed it on his desk. "Pages 14 through 22, she said. "Every task from the days in question. Times, floors, supervisor initials. I also noted 2 occasions where I found my cart had been moved from where I left it during my break. I didn't know what to make of it at the time." He opened the notebook to page 14. Her handwriting was small and precise. Every entry dated, timed, initialed where applicable. The 2 cart incidents were noted with the same matter-of-fact brevity as everything else, which somehow made them more credible than if she had flagged them dramatically. He read through to page 22. He closed the notebook and held it out to her. She took it and put it back in her pocket. "You've been keeping this since before the complaints were filed," he said. "Since the 2nd week," she said. Something felt uneven. I didn't know what. I just knew I needed to be able to account for myself. That's not a typical instinct for someone in your position. "I grew up in an orphanage," she said simply. "You learn quickly that no one is going to account for you if you don't do it yourself." The office was very quiet. Jae-won sat down. He had not intended to sit. He had intended to keep the physical dynamic of the room in his favor, the way he always did in meetings that required him to manage distance carefully. But something about the way she had said that, not for sympathy, not with any particular weight, just as a fact about how the world had worked for her, made the standing feel unnecessary. He sat and he looked at her across the desk, and he tried to find Jennifer in her face one more time. He couldn't. Not because the face was different. It was the same face, precise and unchanged. But Jennifer had always looked at him from behind something. Composure, calculation, the specific guardedness of a woman who had decided exactly how much of herself to give at any moment. He had found that quality compelling once. It had kept him interested in a way that pure openness might not have. Jessica looked at him from behind nothing. What he saw was simply what was there. It was, in an entirely different way, just as compelling. "You can go back to your floor," he said. She stood. She was at the door when he spoke again. "Jessica." She turned. "The person behind the complaints," he said. "When I find out who it is, you'll be informed." She looked at him for a moment. "Thank you." She left. He sat alone in his office for a long time after the door closed. It started in small moments after that. He passed her in the corridor one morning and stopped. He did not have a reason to stop. He stopped anyway. She was wiping down a window panel near the elevator bank, and she turned when she heard him approach, and for a moment neither of them said anything. "You're here early," she said. "I'm always here early." "I know," she said. "I've noticed." He had not expected that. "What else have you noticed?" She thought about it with the seriousness she brought to most things. "You take the long corridor instead of the short one in the morning. You always carry your phone in your left hand, even though you're right-handed. And you drink your coffee before your meetings, not during." He looked at her. "You've been watching me." "You've been watching me for a month," she said, without any accusation in it. It seemed fair. He almost smiled. He didn't quite, but it was close enough that she saw it, and the small thing that moved across her own face in response was not something either of them commented on. He asked her to dinner 2 weeks later. He did not frame it as a question. He appeared at the service entrance at the end of her shift one Tuesday evening when the autumn had started to pull the warmth out of the soul air, and he said he knew a place, and he thought she should eat something proper before she went home. She looked at him for a moment. "Is this how you ask people things?" she said. "You just tell them?" "Usually." "And it works?" "Usually." She looked at him for another moment. Then she took off her work lanyard, put it in her bag, and said she hoped the place he knew had good jollof because she hadn't had a proper meal since Tuesday. It was Tuesday. He looked at her. She shrugged. "I've been busy." They went. The restaurant was quiet and warm, and the kind of place that did not need to announce itself. Jaewon knew the owner. Their table was in a corner, with enough privacy that the rest of the room faded into background. Jessica looked at the menu with the focused attention she brought to everything, and asked 2 questions about ingredients, and ordered without hesitation. She ate like someone who was genuinely hungry and was not performing anything about it. And there was something about that, the complete absence of self-consciousness, that made the meal feel more comfortable than most of the dinners Jaewon had sat through in the past several years. They talked. Not about his work. Not about hers in any formal sense. They talked the way people talk when they are finding out who the other person is, following threads, circling back, moving between topics without a clear agenda. She told him about growing up in Ibadan, about the orphanage, which she discussed the way she discussed most things about her past, directly, without drama, as a series of facts that had shaped her rather than wounds she was still managing. She told him about the business degree, about Lagos, about the decision to come to Seoul, which had been equal parts ambition, and the particular courage that comes from having nothing anchoring you in one place. He told her things he did not usually tell people, not about the organization, but about himself, what he had wanted when he was younger and had quietly set aside, what he found tolerable about his life, and what he had simply learned to work around. She listened without filling in his sentences, which was rarer than it should have been, and when she responded, she said things that were actually about what he had said, rather than what she wanted to say next. He reached across the table at some point to move a glass that was close to the edge. His hand covered hers briefly in the process. She went completely still. It lasted only a second. His hand over hers. Neither of them moving. Then she shifted her hand away slowly, not with alarm, but with the careful deliberateness of someone stepping back from something they needed a moment with. She looked down at the table. "Are you all right?" he said. "Yes." She looked up. "Sorry, I don't know why I did that." He looked at her. "Did what?" She shook her head slightly. "Nothing. It's nothing." She picked up her glass and drank and moved the conversation forward, and he let her. But he had seen the look on her face in that moment before she recovered. Not fear, not discomfort, but something older than both of those things. Something that had surfaced briefly and then been pushed back down before she had a chance to name it. He filed it the way he filed everything. On the bus home that night, Jessica sat by the window and watched Sol move past in the dark and thought about that moment at the table. The feeling that had moved through her when his hand covered hers. Not romantic, or not only that. Something underneath the romantic. Something that felt like a door in a room she had never been able to find the entrance to, shifting slightly on its hinges. She had felt it once before. Years ago. A specific night in the orphanage when she was very young. Young enough that the memory had no images attached to it, only sensation. The feeling of a small hand holding hers in the dark. Warmth that she had woken from like a dream and spent years convincing herself was only a dream. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the bus window. It wasn't a big thing, she told herself. People had strange moments. The mind made connections that didn't mean anything. She pushed it away and went home. What followed over the next several weeks was not something either of them announced. He took her to dinner again. Then again. He began appearing at the end of her shifts with the regularity of someone who had made a private decision and was not yet ready to make it public. She stopped being surprised to see him there and started being something else instead. Something warmer and more complicated that she examined in small pieces rather than all at once. The organization noticed. Nobody said anything to Jaewon directly. Nobody was going to. But the quality of the attention in the building shifted in the particular way it shifts in closed environments where hierarchy matters, and everyone is watching the person at the top for information about what is permitted. Woo-chul noticed most of all. He sat with what he was seeing for several days, and felt the thing that had been sitting in his chest since he first saw Jaewon's attention land on Jessica begin to tighten into something more urgent. He had spent 2 years believing the problem was solved. Jennifer was gone. The thing she had seen, the quiet arrangement Woo-chul had been running on the side, the money that moved through the organization's accounts in ways that Jaewon had not authorized, was buried with her departure. He had helped her disappear cleanly and efficiently, and told himself it was a transaction that benefited both of them. He had not anticipated a twin. He did not know yet that Jessica was a twin. He did not know anything about the connection between the two women. All he knew was that Han Jaewon had become attached to a woman who cleaned his floors, and that attached men shared things, and that shared things had a way of becoming dangerous. He needed her gone. He had already tried the quiet route, and it hadn't worked. The complaints had been reviewed and dismissed, and now Jaewon was personally invested, which made the quiet route significantly more complicated. He began to think about less quiet options. Jessica was alone on the 14th floor on a Wednesday evening, finishing the last section of her assigned area, when the lights went out. Not a full blackout, a section cut, the kind that happened during maintenance work. Except no maintenance had been scheduled for the 14th floor that evening. She knew because she had checked the building schedule that morning, the way she checked it every morning. She stood still in the sudden dark and listened. The floor was empty. Everyone else had gone. She was the last one on this section because she had stayed late to finish an area she hadn't completed during the day. She heard something at the far end of the corridor. A door. Then footsteps that were moving with a purpose that did not sound like maintenance. She did not wait to find out what the purpose was. She moved to the service stairwell, pushed through the door, and went down 2 floors before the lights came back on above her. She stood in the stairwell with her hand on the door, and her heart beat loud in her ears, and breathed. She went home. She wrote everything in her notebook: time, floor, what she heard, what she did. She did not sleep well. The next morning, she arrived at work and found a message from the floor manager saying her shift assignment had been changed. She was no longer on 14. She had been moved to the lower floors without explanation. She wrote that down too. Jae-won found out about the 14th floor from his own surveillance system. He reviewed the camera footage the following morning as part of a routine security check and found 17 minutes of darkness on that floor during a window that had not been cleared by his security team. He found the maintenance log that should have authorized it and didn't exist. He found Jessica's figure moving through the dark corridor on the camera that had remained partially functional, pushing through the stairwell door. He sat with that footage for a long time. Then he pulled Woo-chul's access records for the previous 48 hours. Then he called Woo-chul into his office and closed the door. He did not raise his voice. He never did. He laid out what he had found with the precision of someone who had already decided what it meant and was giving the other person the opportunity to say something that might change that assessment. Woo-chul said enough and not enough. He did not confess to the 14th floor directly. But the things he said to defend himself revealed the shape of what he had been doing. The way a cloth thrown over an object reveals the shape of the object even while concealing it. Na Jae-won suspended his access to all systems that evening. He told no one else yet. He needed the full shape of it before he moved. But Woo-chul's access to the building, to the organization's internal communications, to everything, gone by midnight. He went to find Jessica that evening. She was in the small staff room on the ground floor again, notebook open on the table, eating from her container with the focused quiet of someone who was used to eating alone and had made peace with it. She looked up when he came in. He sat across from her without being invited. She watched him and waited. "You need to stop working here," he said. She set down her spoon. "No." "Jessica?" "No," she said again, and her voice was calm and clear and completely final. "I didn't come to Seoul to be someone's project. I didn't take this job to leave it because things got complicated. Whatever is happening in this building, I have documented everything. I'm not the problem, and I'm not going to disappear because someone wants me to." He looked at her. "I'm not asking you to disappear," he said. "I'm telling you that something is happening that I haven't fully resolved yet, and until I do, you are safer somewhere else." "Safer," she repeated. She looked at him steadily. "Jae-won, I grew up with nothing, and I built everything I have by staying when it was hard. If you want me to leave, you're going to need a better reason than safer." The staff room was very quiet. He looked at this woman across a table with her name written on her lunch container and her notebook full of careful handwriting and her complete refusal to be moved by anything he had said, and something in him that had been held at a careful distance for weeks simply stopped being at a careful distance. He reached across the table. He took her hand, properly this time, not incidentally. She looked down at their hands, then up at him. "I'm not asking you to go forever," he said quietly. "I'm asking you to let me handle this first." "And if I say no?" "Then you say no," he said, "and I handle it anyway, and you stay." She looked at him for a long time. "You're very strange," she said. "I know." Something shifted in her face, not quite a smile. Something more honest than a smile. She did not leave. What came after that was quieter and more certain than anything that had come before it. He did not pressure her about the job again. She continued working her shifts, and he continued appearing at the end of them, and the thing between them stopped being undefined and became simply what it was, real, unannounced, and known to both of them without needing to be spoken. She stayed over for the first time on a Friday in November. She left in the morning, not because she was running, but because she had an early shift, and she told him so while she was looking for her second shoe, which had ended up somewhere improbable, and he watched her from the bed with something on his face that he did not bother to hide. She found the shoe. She looked back at him from the doorway. Don't look at me like that, she said. Like what? Like you're going to miss me in 20 minutes? I'm not going to miss you in 20 minutes, he said. She raised an eyebrow. It'll take at least an hour, he said. She laughed, open, sudden, completely unguarded, and left. He lay in the quiet of his bedroom after the door closed and looked at the ceiling and felt something he had not felt in a long time and had not expected to feel again. He did not examine it too closely. He let it be what it was. She came back on a Friday, not a dramatic entrance. No announcement, no warning, nothing that prepared the lobby for what was about to happen. Just a woman walking through the main entrance of Hanul Capital Group at 11 in the morning with a carry-on bag on her shoulder, a car seat in one hand, Jen and a 20-month-old girl settled on her hip like she had been carrying her that way since the beginning of the world, which she had. Jennifer Adeyemi walked to the front desk with the composure of someone who had rehearsed this moment many times and was now simply executing it. She had dressed carefully, not formally, carefully. The kind of outfit that said, "I am not here to perform," but that had nevertheless been chosen with full awareness of how it would read. She set the car seat down on the floor beside her. "I need to see Han Jae-won," she said. The receptionist looked at her. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Jennifer said. "Tell him Jennifer Adeyemi is here. He'll know the name." The receptionist picked up the phone. The call reached Wuchel's former desk first, rerouted by a system that had not yet been fully updated since his access was suspended. The junior staff member who received it looked at the name on the message, looked at the note attached to the line flagging it for senior attention, and escalated it upward. It reached Jae-won's assistant within 4 minutes. His assistant knocked and entered, and delivered the message with the careful neutrality that the situation seemed to require. Jae-won was at his desk reviewing a document. He went very still. "Say that again," he said quietly. His assistant said it again. He set the document down. He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked to the elevator without another word. He came down alone. He had told his assistant to stay. He had told security to stand by, but not to position themselves visibly. Whatever this was. He wanted to read it without an audience. The elevator doors opened onto the lobby. He saw her immediately. She was standing near the reception desk with the child on her hip. She had not sat down. She was the kind of woman who made decisions about posture in advance and had decided that sitting would communicate the wrong thing. When she heard the elevator, she turned. Their eyes met across the lobby. 2 years collapsed into nothing. He looked at her face, the face he had searched for in the months after she left, the face he had eventually stopped searching for, the face he had then found again on a woman who did not know him, and felt something that was not what he expected to feel. He had expected anger. He felt something colder than anger, more controlled, the particular emotional temperature of a man who has had enough time to move past the heat of something and arrive at the part where he simply needs to understand it. He walked toward her slowly. She held her ground. The child on her hip turned to look at the man approaching and regarded him with the serious, uncomplicated attention of a 20-month-old who had not yet learned to perform anything. Jae-won stopped in front of Jennifer. He looked at the child. The girl looked back at him. She had Jennifer's Nigerian features and something else entirely in her eyes, a particular shape, a particular depth, that had nothing to do with Jennifer at all. It was a thing you would only notice if you were looking for it, or if you had spent enough time looking in a mirror to know your own face well enough to recognize its components in someone else's. He looked at Jennifer. "How old?" he said. It was not quite a question. 20 months, she said. The lobby was very quiet. "Her name?" he said. "Sua," Jennifer said. "I named her Sua." He looked at the child again. Sua looked back at him with her father's eyes in her mother's face and reached out one small hand toward his jacket lapel with the unprejudiced curiosity of someone who had not yet been taught that some things were dangerous to reach for. He let her touch the lapel. He looked back at Jennifer. "Come upstairs," he said. He did not take her to his main office. He took her to a smaller room on the floor below. A meeting room with a table and chairs, and a window that looked out over a side street rather than the full Seoul skyline. A room for conversations that needed walls around them, but did not need to happen at the center of anything. Jennifer settled Sua on her lap with a small toy from her bag. The child occupied herself immediately. Jae-won sat across from them. He waited. Jennifer had prepared what she was going to say on the flight from London. She had arranged it carefully, the sequence, the framing, the parts she would lead with, and the parts she would hold back. She had been over it enough times that it should have come out cleanly. It didn't. Because sitting across from him now, in this building, in this city she had left in the dark 2 years ago, with his daughter on her lap, reaching for her toy with both small hands, the prepared version felt like what it was, a performance. And Jennifer was tired of performing. She told him the truth, all of it. The month they had. The missed period she had dismissed as stress. The last Saturday when she had known, without yet having confirmed it, that something had changed. The decision she had made while he was sleeping, not because she didn't feel what she felt, but because she felt it too much and understood too clearly what his world would do to something that felt like that. She told him about the discovery 10 days after landing in London, the confirmation she had held alone for a week before she could say it out loud to herself in a mirror. She told him about Woo-chul. She had not planned to tell him about Woo-chul first. She had planned to leave that for later, to use it if she needed leverage. But sitting here, it felt wrong to hold it. So she gave it. Before she left Seoul, in the last week of that August, she had been early to collect equipment from an event space on the 22nd floor of this very building. She had used a service entrance she wasn't supposed to use and arrived before the space was cleared. She had overheard a conversation she was not meant to hear. Woo-chul on a phone call, speaking in the specific clipped shorthand of someone discussing money that didn't officially exist, moving through channels it was not authorized to move through. She had not fully understood what she was hearing. But she had understood enough to know it involved Jae-won's organization and that Woo-chul was aware of her presence in the building because he had seen her at the event. 2 days later, he had come to her privately. He had not threatened her directly. He had simply made it clear, with the efficient courtesy of someone who was very good at what they did, that Seoul had become an inconvenient place for her and that he could help her leave it cleanly and quickly if she chose to go. She had chosen to go. She had already been planning to leave. His involvement simply accelerated it and provided the means. She had told herself it was practical. She had not let herself think too hard about what she was walking away from. She looked at Jae-won across the table when she finished. His face had not changed expression throughout. He had listened the way he always listened, completely, without interruption, without giving anything away. "Why did you come back?" he said. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "Because I've been in London for 2 years, and Sua is starting to look more like you every month," she said. "And because I am tired of making decisions alone that involve more than just me." She looked down at her daughter. "She deserves to know who her father is, and you deserve to know she exists." Jae-won said nothing for a long moment. Then he asked the question he had been sitting on since the lobby. "Jennifer," he said, "do you have a sister?" The room changed. Not physically. Nothing moved. But something shifted in the quality of the air between them. Jennifer looked up at him very slowly. "Why are you asking me that?" she said. Her voice had changed. Careful now. Careful in a way it hadn't been for the past 20 minutes. "Answer the question." The silence stretched. "I was adopted," Jennifer said finally. "When I was 3, I found the orphanage records when I was 19. There was a notation." She stopped. "What did the notation say?" Jennifer looked at him. "That I had come in with a younger sibling," she said quietly. 18 months old at the time. A girl. "And you never went back." It was not a question. Jennifer heard the weight in it anyway. "My life was complicated," she said. "I told myself I would go when things settled. Things never settled. And then years passed and She stopped. "I know how that sounds." "It sounds like what it is," Jae-won said. Jennifer said nothing. He stood up. "Stay in this room," he said. I'll have someone bring you and Sua whatever you need. He walked to the door. Jaewon, Jennifer said. He stopped but didn't turn. Is she here? Jennifer said. My sister. Is she in this building? The pause before he answered was long enough to be its own answer. He left without saying anything. Jessica was on the 9th floor. She had been assigned a deep clean of the conference rooms that ran along the east side of the building, a job that required time and focus, and that she had been working through steadily since 9 that morning. She had her notebook in her pocket. She had her container in her bag for lunch. She had her earphones in one ear, the way she always worked when the floor was quiet, listening to something low and rhythmic that kept her pace even. She heard the elevator before she saw it. She pulled her earphone out. The doors opened, and Jaewon stepped out. She looked at him immediately because she had learned to read him in the weeks they had been whatever they were, and she could tell from across the length of a corridor when something had changed in him, the particular set of his shoulders, the quality of the quiet around him. Something had changed. She pulled her cart to the side of the corridor and waited. He walked toward her and stopped and looked at her face for a moment in the way he sometimes did. Not the way he had looked at her in the beginning, searching for something, but differently now, like he was making sure she was still there. I need you to come downstairs with me, he said. What's happened? I need you to come downstairs, he said again. I'll explain everything. But I need you to come first. She looked at him. She pulled off her gloves and put them in her cart. She took off her work lanyard and folded it into her pocket. She smoothed her uniform once with both hands. Not nervously, just neatly, the way she did everything. Okay, she said. They went to the elevator. He pressed the button for the floor below his office. They rode down in silence. She could feel him deciding how to begin, and she did not rush him. She watched the floor numbers change and waited. The doors opened. He walked her to the meeting room. He stopped outside the door. Jessica, he said, whatever you see in this room, I need you to know that I am going to explain all of it. Everything. Nothing that is in that room is something I kept from you deliberately. Do you understand? She looked at him. You're frightening me. I know, he said. I'm sorry. He opened the door. Jennifer was at the table with Sua standing on her lap, both small hands gripping Jennifer's fingers for balance, conducting the serious business of practicing standing. Jennifer was watching the door when it opened. Jessica stepped through. The world stopped. It stopped for both of them simultaneously and completely, the way things stop when the mind encounters something it has no existing framework for and simply ceases normal function until one can be constructed. Jessica looked at the woman at the table. The woman at the table looked at Jessica. Same face. Not similar. Not resemblance. The same face, precise and complete and impossible, sitting across a room wearing a different life. Sua, still gripping her mother's fingers, she's turned to look at the woman in the doorway with the impartial curiosity of someone for whom the world was still a place where extraordinary things were simply ordinary things she hadn't seen yet. Jessica's hand found the doorframe. She was not aware of reaching for it. Her hand simply arrived there, looking for something solid. Jennifer stood up slowly, settling Sua against her hip, and she was standing now, and they were the same height and the same build and the same everything, and the room was absolutely silent. Jessica's mouth opened. Nothing came out. She looked at Jaewon. He was watching her with the careful attention of someone who is ready to catch something if it falls. She looked back at the woman across the room. "Who are you?" she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Jennifer's composure, now so carefully rebuilt on the flight from London, so precisely maintained through the lobby and the elevator and the meeting room and the 20 minutes of truth-telling, cracked. Not dramatically. No tears, no sound. Just a visible fracture, a thing breaking behind the eyes. The specific expression of a person who has spent a long time being the one who knows things looking at the person they chose not to know. "My name is Jennifer," she said. Her voice was not entirely steady. Jennifer Adeyemi. The name landed in Jessica's chest like something physical. Adeyemi. Her name. Her name on a stranger's mouth, in a stranger's voice that sounded, in some register she had never heard before, like an echo. The small girl on Jennifer's hip reached out her hand toward Jessica, the same way she had reached toward Jae-won's lapel in the lobby. Without fear, without agenda, just the simple reaching of someone who saw something and wanted to touch it. Jessica looked at that small outstretched hand, and something in her, old, wordless, a door that had been shut for so long she had stopped looking for the handle, opened. Not all the way, just enough to let the light in. Her eyes filled. She did not let them fall. She looked at Jae-won one more time. He gave her the smallest nod. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. She looked back at Jennifer. And she stood in that doorway, or with her work lanyard folded in her pocket, and her notebook against her chest, and her whole understanding of her own life, rewriting itself line by line. And she waited to hear what came next. Jae-won left them alone. Not because he didn't want to stay, because some rooms needed to belong only to the people inside them, and this was one of those rooms, and he understood that without being told. He closed the door behind him and stood in the corridor and listened to the silence on the other side of it. Then he went upstairs to do what needed to be done. Inside the room, nobody spoke for a long time. Sua had been set down on the floor with her toy and was occupied with it in the complete and serious way of small children who do not yet know that the world around them is falling and rebuilding simultaneously. She moved her toy from one hand to the other and made a small sound of satisfaction and did not require anything from either of the women watching her. Jessica had come fully into the room. She had not sat down. She stood near the window with her arms loose at her sides and looked at Jennifer, the way you look at something when your eyes are working correctly, but your mind is still negotiating with what they are sending back. Jennifer sat at the table. She had stopped trying to hold her composure in the particular way she had been holding it. It was still there, but it had softened at the edges, the way things do when the performance is no longer the point. How long have you known? Jessica said. Her voice was even, quieter than usual, but even. Since I was 19, Jennifer said. I found the orphanage records. There was a notation about a younger sibling. She paused. 18 months old, a girl. Jessica looked at her. I'm 24, Jessica said. I know. So you've known for 5 years. Jennifer did not look away. Yes? The room held that. Jessica turned to the window. She looked at the side street below. Ordinary soul moving past in the ordinary way, people and vehicles, and the indifferent rhythm of a city that did not know or care what was happening 14 floors above it. I was told my twin died, Jessica said. At the orphanage. They told me I came in with a sister who didn't survive. She paused. I was maybe 4 years old. I believed it my whole life. She heard Jennifer's breath change behind her. They told you that? Jennifer said quietly. Yes. Silence. I had one memory, Jessica continued. Not even a memory, a feeling, a small hand holding mine in the dark. I thought it was a dream. She turned from the window. It wasn't a dream, was it? Jennifer's eyes were wet. No, she said. It wasn't. Jessica looked at her twin's face, her own face, wearing a different life, carrying different years, and felt something move through her that was too large and too complicated to be called any one thing. Grief and fury and something that was almost relief and something else entirely that she did not have a name for yet. Why didn't you come back? She said. Jennifer opened her mouth. Not the complicated version, Jessica said. Not the one with the context and the timing and everything that was happening in your life. The simple version. Why didn't you come back? Jennifer closed her mouth. She sat with the question. Because I was afraid, she said finally, of what I would find, of what it would mean, of what it would require of me. She looked at her hands on the table. I had built a life. I had made it work. Going back meant opening something I had closed, and I didn't know what would come out of it. So you left me there, Jessica said. Not loudly. Not with the particular heat of someone who wants to wound. just clearly, a fact being stated with the weight it deserved. Jennifer did not try to argue with it. "Yes," she said. "I left you there." The room was very quiet. Sua looked up from her toy and regarded both women with her calm, uncomplicated gaze, then looked back down. Jessica watched her for a moment, this child who had her face in miniature. This child who had grown in the dark for 9 months while her mother flew away from Seoul and said nothing to anyone. This child who had reached out her small hand in a doorway without knowing why, and found the outstretched edge of something she would only understand much later. "What do you want?" Jessica said. She looked at Jennifer. "From being here, from coming back, what is it that you actually want?" Jennifer was quiet for a moment, and here was where the prepared version would have served her. The rehearsed answer, measured, strategic, the right balance of honesty and positioning. She had it ready. She did not use it. "I want my life back," she said. "The one I had here. Or something like it." She looked at Jessica directly. "I want Jaewon." The honesty of it landed without softening. Jessica held it. "He's not a thing to be retrieved," she said. "I know that." "Do you?" Jennifer looked at her. "I know how this looks. I know what I walked into when I came through that door. I'm not blind to it." She paused. "But I was with him first. Whatever you two have built, it started with something he and I had. And I have his child." Jessica looked at her for a long moment. "You left," she said simply. "You made a decision, and you executed it, and you left. What happened after that is not something you get to reclaim because the timing is better now. That's not your decision to make." "You're right," Jessica said. "It's his." She picked up her lanyard from her pocket. She looked at it for a moment. The small laminated card with her name on it. The thing she had worn every day in this building while she built something from nothing in a city that hadn't asked her to come. She put it back in her pocket. She looked at Sua one more time. Then she walked to the door. "Jessica," Jennifer said. She stopped. "I'm sorry," Jennifer said. "For the orphanage. For the 5 years. For all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything." Jessica stood with her hand on the door. "No," she said quietly. "It doesn't." She left. Upstairs, Jaewon was finishing what he had started. The full investigation into Wuchul had taken 11 days to complete. It was complete now. The picture it produced was detailed and damning. 7 years of carefully managed financial diversion, small enough in individual transactions to avoid pattern detection, and large enough in aggregate to represent a significant and sustained betrayal. The arrangement with Jennifer's departure 2 years ago was in there too, documented in the phone records and the payment trail that led to the agency that had helped her leave Seoul cleanly and quietly. Wuchul had built something elaborate and patient inside the organization that Jaewon had built. He had done it slowly enough and carefully enough that it had gone undetected for years. It was detected now. Jaewon sat across from him in the same small meeting room where Jennifer had told her story that morning, now cleared and reset, and laid the full document on the table between them. Wuchul looked at it. He did not attempt to explain it away. He was too intelligent for that, and he had always known this day was a possibility. He sat with the particular stillness of someone who has been waiting for something and has finally stopped waiting. "The 14th floor," Jaewon said. Wuchul said nothing. "Jessica Adeyemi," Jaewon said. "The complaints, the access card, the maintenance incident that wasn't a maintenance incident." Still nothing. "Jennifer," Jaewon said. Wuchul looked up. "You helped her leave because she overheard something she wasn't supposed to." Jaewon walked to the elevator and did not look back. He found Jessica in the stairwell, not the 14th floor, the 3rd. She was sitting on the steps with her back against the wall and her notebook open on her knees, not writing in it, just holding it, the way you hold something familiar when you need your hands to have something to do. He sat down beside her. The stairwell was concrete and fluorescent and completely without atmosphere, which was somehow exactly right for this moment. No view, no backdrop, just 2 people on a step. She didn't look at him immediately. "She told me what she wants," Jessica said. "I know what she wants," he said. "And?" He looked at her profile. "And I know what I want. Those are two different things." She was quiet. "She has your child," Jessica said. "Yes," he said. Sua is mine. I'm going to be in her life completely. I'm going to provide everything she needs. That is not a question." He paused. "But a child is not a contract. Having my daughter does not determine what I choose." Jessica turned to look at him. He held her gaze. "I know the difference between you and Jennifer," he said. "I knew it before I knew what the difference was. I fell for you knowing you were not her, not because you looked like her." He paused. "You are not a replacement. You were never a replacement. You are someone I chose." She looked at him for a long time. Then she looked back at the stairwell wall. "I found out today that I have a sister," she said. "That I was never alone in the world the way I thought I was. That a small hand holding mine in the dark was not a dream." She stopped. And I found out that she knew for 5 years and said nothing." He said nothing. He let her have the space of it. "I don't know what to do with all of that yet," she said. "You don't have to know yet." "I know." She looked at the notebook in her hands. "I just need to say it out loud to someone." "Then say it." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm angry," she said. "At Jennifer. At whoever told me my twin was dead. At every person who made a decision about my life without asking me." She paused. "And I'm sad. In a way that doesn't have a clean shape yet. Because I spent my whole life thinking I was completely alone, and it turns out I wasn't, and somehow that makes the aloneness worse, not better, because it didn't have to be." The stairwell held that. Jaewon reached over and covered her hand with his. She looked down at their hands. Then she turned hers over and held his properly, the way she had not done that first night at dinner when she had pulled back before she could understand why. She held it now. Jennifer stayed in Seoul for a week. Jaewon arranged accommodation for her and Sua without discussion. He met with Jennifer twice more, once with a lawyer present to establish formal recognition of Sua and arrangements for her care, once alone. The alone conversation was shorter than Jennifer had expected. He was not cold, not punishing, not performing indifference. He was simply clear, in the way he was clear about most things, and clarity from a man like Han Jae-won left very little room for negotiation. He would be Sua's father, fully, without condition, in whatever way the child needed. He would not be Jennifer's way back to anything else. Jennifer heard him. She did not accept it immediately. She was not built for immediate acceptance of things she had not chosen. But she heard him, and in the quiet of the apartment he had arranged for her, with Sua asleep in the next room, and Seoul dark outside the window, she sat with it long enough to begin to understand that it was final. She had made a decision 2 years ago in the dark while he was sleeping. He had made one now. On the 5th day, Jennifer sent Jessica a message. Short, no preamble, an address and a time. Jessica looked at the message for a long time. She went. They met in a small cafe 2 streets from the building, neutral ground, neither of their territories. Sua was in her car seat beside the table, asleep, one small fist curled beside her cheek. They ordered coffee and sat across from each other, and for the first few minutes, neither of them spoke. They were still learning how to be in the same space, how to look at each other without the looking becoming too much. Jennifer spoke first. "I'm going back to London," she said, "at the end of the week." Jessica nodded. "I'll bring Sua back regularly," Jennifer said. "Jaewon and I have worked out an arrangement." She paused. "It's a good arrangement. For her." "Good," Jessica said. Silence. "I want to keep in contact," Jennifer said. "With you, if you're willing." She looked at her coffee cup. "I know I don't have the right to ask for that. I know I don't have the right to ask for anything from you. I'm asking anyway because—" She stopped. "Because what?" Jessica said. Sighed. Jennifer looked up. "Because you are the only person in the world who has my face," she said quietly. "And I spent 19 years not knowing you existed, and 5 years knowing and doing nothing, and I don't want to spend the rest of my life doing nothing. Jessica looked at her twin. Her sister. The word was still new in her mouth, still finding its shape. She looked at Sua, sleeping in her car seat, with her small fist curled, and her father's eyes moving beneath her closed lids in whatever dream a 20-month-old has. This child who was her blood, whether anyone had planned it or not. This child who would grow up and look in a mirror and see something of Jessica in her own face without knowing why. She thought about the orphanage in Ibadan, the years of being completely and entirely alone in the world. The small hand holding hers in the dark that she had spent decades dismissing as a dream. She thought about what it would mean to dismiss it again now. She looked at Jennifer. "I'm not ready to be your sister yet," she said. "I want to be honest about that. I'm not there. There's too much between here and there, and I don't know how long it's going to take me to cross it." Jennifer nodded. She had expected this, or something like it. "But that little girl," Jessica said. She looked at Sua. She didn't make any of the choices that brought her here, and she is going to grow up knowing she has people. She looked back at Jennifer. "So, we start there, with her, and we see what we build from it." Jennifer looked at her for a long moment. Something in her face shifted. Not relief exactly, but the particular expression of someone who has been carrying something very heavy and has been told they can set it down, not handed back to them, but not dropped either. Something in between that requires its own kind of strength. "Okay," Jennifer said quietly. "Okay," Jessica said. They drank their coffee. Sua slept. Outside the cafe, Seoul moved past in its ordinary way, indifferent to the specific and extraordinary thing happening at a small corner table. Two women with the same face sitting across from each other for only the second time in their lives, building something from what was left after everything else had been named. It was not forgiveness yet. It was not warmth yet, but it was a beginning. And Jessica, who had made entire lives out of beginnings, you knew better than most people what you could build from one if you were patient enough and stubborn enough and willing to stay. She walked back to the building alone. The autumn air was cool and direct, and the streets were busy in the mid-morning way of a city that had been running since before she woke up and would still be running long after she went to sleep. She walked without hurrying. She had learned Seoul slowly and on foot, the way you learn a city when you cannot afford any other way, and she knew this stretch of streets well enough now that she didn't have to think about where she was going. She went in through the main entrance. Not the service entrance. She had been going in through the service entrance every morning for months, because that was the entrance for the cleaning staff. Today, she walked through the main entrance and across the lobby and pressed the elevator button and rode up. She was not a cleaning staff member who was seeing the man at the top of the building. She was Jessica Adeyemi, who had come to Seoul alone with 2 suitcases and a plan she had revised 4 times, and had built something real in a city that had not made it easy. Who had documented every room and every task in a small notebook because she had learned a long time ago that nobody was going to account for her if she didn't do it herself. Who had been told her whole life that she was alone in the world and had turned out to be wrong about that in ways that were still unfolding. Who had stayed when it was hard. Who was still here. The elevator opened on his floor. Jae-won was in the corridor, coming from the direction of his office. He saw her and stopped. She walked toward him. "How did it go?" he said. "We had coffee," she said. "It was hard, and it was necessary, and we're going to try." She stopped in front of him. "We start with Sua. Everything else takes the time it takes." He looked at her. "That's more than she deserved," he said. "Maybe," Jessica said, "but it's what I decided." He nodded. She looked up at him, and he looked down at her, and between them was everything that had happened in this building over the past months. The corridor, the notebook, the dinner, the stairwell, all of it accumulating into the particular weight of something real. "I'm not leaving Seoul," she said. "I want to be clear about that. Whatever happens, whatever we are, I came here to build something, and I'm going to build it." "You don't get to be a reason I stopped doing that." "I know," he said. "Good," she said. She moved past him toward his office. "Jessica," he said. She turned. The corner of his mouth moved. Almost a smile. Almost. You're not on the cleaning staff anymore, he said. I've had HR prepare a different contract. When you're ready. She looked at him. What kind of contract? She said carefully. The kind that matches what you're actually worth, he said. Operations, junior management track. It's a starting point. She held his gaze. I'll read it first, she said. I expected nothing less, he said. She looked at him for one more moment. Then she went into his office and sat down and waited for him to bring her the contract. She did not feel like a woman who had been chosen. She felt like a woman who had stayed. There was a difference, and she had always known which one mattered more. Jessica could have left Seoul the moment things got complicated. She had every reason to. A man who saw someone else's face when he looked at her. A sister who had known she existed for 5 years and said nothing. A building full of people who had tried to push her out quietly before she could become inconvenient. She stayed anyway. Not for Jaewon, not for Jennifer, not for the little girl with her blood and his eyes. For herself. Because she had built something real in this city, and she was not going to let anyone's choices, not Jennifer's, not Woo Chol's, not the orphanage that told her a living person was dead, determine how her story ended. If this story moved you, send it to someone who needs to be reminded of this. You do not have to have had an easy life to refuse to let that life define your ceiling. Subscribe if you are new to this channel, and drop a comment below telling me, did Jennifer deserve the chance Jessica gave her? Or was Jessica too generous with a woman who had all the information and still chose silence? I read every single one. See you in the next story.